Hello, how you doing?
Well, thanks a lot for this kind introduction. Yeah, I'm one of the founders of IQM, and I will tell you a little bit about why we are so excited about quantum, a little bit about how we build the computers, but I will not become too technical. And then I have just a selection of a few use cases, just to give you a feeling what can be done today with these machines, and of course then what we hope to achieve in the future. So IQM is a company headquartered in Finland. We started 2019 out of Aalto University, which is the big tech university there in Helsinki. Most of the quantum startups, like in the deep tech field in general, are university spin-outs. And we have been growing now to the biggest effort in quantum computing out of Europe. So we are a bit more than 300 employees. We have raised a bit more than $600 million in capital. And we are actually running our own chip factory. So the quantum chips in our computers, we produce them up in Finland on 200 millimeter wafers. And we have also an assembly line where we then build the computers together. And then either we sell the computers to scientific computing centers, research centers and the like, or we sell time through the cloud. And this is kind of just the beginning. So the whole field came out of the universities. Maybe starting in 2015 or so. This was when Google announced that they would build quantum computers themselves. During this time, also some of the larger US startups were formed, and IBM was always a little bit in there. So we are now maybe 10 years into the race for what we call quantum advantage, building a quantum computer that really delivers also a commercial advantage when using the system and not only scientific compute. So why is there so much interest and why are people so excited about it? And the big thing is that you can, if you have a large-scale quantum computer, you can calculate things that you will never be able to solve with a conventional transistor-based computers. And this we can show that some of the problems, they are so complex that you would need more transistors than we have atoms in the universe. So it's really impossible to build such a machine. If you do the math and just say you assume very big computing centers, some of those problems, they are so hard that you would run for thousands or millions of years, so it's really impractical to do so. So this is really the big promise. So it's not just kind of acceleration of maybe 2 or 3 or something in the compute power, but it's really an exponential speed up. And the nice thing about it is that actually there are use cases out there which really have a huge impact. Not only for society, but also for, let's say, our planet, for the climate and the like. And one such example is actually the global food production, which relies heavily on fertilizers. This is the way we are able actually to feed the whole population on this planet. And the fertilizer production, as many of you probably know, is still based on a very established process, the Haber-Bosch process, which operates at high temperatures, high pressures. And the challenge is that it's really hard to simulate on a molecular level what's going on there and to improve this. And this is one of those cases where a quantum computer could be used to actually simulate the chemical foundations and then hopefully help us understand the process better and improve the efficiency of fertilizers and of the production. And in this way, maybe solve 2 problems at the same time, the food shortage and also reduce the CO2 emissions, as this is the fertilizer production is one of the main contributors there. Another such problem is in the pharmaceutical industry, where actually the drug discovery process is also a very challenging process, and the pharmaceutical industry is spending huge amounts of money on the R&D side. And one point is that just our current computers are not powerful enough to exactly simulate all of those molecules. And again, this is a use case where a powerful enough quantum computer actually can help. So the way people have been approaching so far this issue is that we've just been building bigger and bigger computers, big data centers, and this means, of course, at some point, these computers become physically really large, like they're filling halls like this building. They cost billions of dollars, and also they consume a lot of power. And these are some of those examples that you see here, like a big AI data center where people invest $40 billion, which consumes 1.2 gigawatts, just this specific data center. Or then the other case where Mark Zuckerberg has been announcing he wants to build a data center that has roughly the size of Manhattan. So these are kind of the scales we are currently talking about. And then you can think about, okay, how long can we keep on scaling this, right? Are we going to build data centers as big as the state of Massachusetts or something like this, right? At some point, it becomes really impractical. And also, our infrastructure is not really ready to do so, right? And we have heard today's also talk about the energy production and alternatives there, but it's also, in the end, the grid that needs to cope with this. And actually, this leads to a situation where, because of all these build-outs of data centers and computing centers, actually others have to suffer. For example, some projects in this example in London were stopped. There are many places on this planet where you can only turn on a new data center when you shut down an old one, because otherwise it doesn't work out. And then, of course, you can say, okay, then we just invest more into the grid and into the energy production, and it's all going to work out. But actually, also, at some point, it becomes a more fundamental problem. So what you see here, actually, the plot on the right-hand side, the green line is all the energy we pump into computers on this planet. And the yellow line is what we have available in energy production on this planet. It's a logarithmic plot, so you have to be a little bit careful. And it's also relatively old plot from 2020. So this was before the AI hype happened. And what people thought back then, okay, we just become a bit more efficient and we flatten this curve, right? And then we don't run into a problem, because if these two lines cross, the green one and the yellow one, then we have a real problem, because then we need to decide whether we shut down Netflix or we do food production. Of course, this is not a nice decision to make. And as I said, so this was 2020, and the reality actually looks like the other plot, right? Instead of flattening the curve, now it goes through the roof because of all the AI compute that we're installing out there. So we're really running into a challenge here, and we need to have more efficient ways to do compute. And quantum can be one alternative here. It's not the solution for everything, and it's not going to be a standalone solution as well. It's going to integrate into GPU and CPU clusters. But it is a way to solve certain problems that are super, super hard to solve exponentially faster. And this is what we do with IQM. So you see on the one side, you see the chip. So this is what I mentioned. We have our own chip factory where we are producing these kind of processors. And on this specific one that you see here, and it's labeled there, we have 54 of those qubits. So what makes these computers special is that they don't compute with transistors, but basically with a quantum version of it. And what this means is that instead of being 0 or 1, they can be in any superposition. And if you want to think about this, actually you can think about the 0 and the 1 being two points. Let's say it's the North Pole and the South Pole. And these are two classical states. The quantum computer also has these two classical states. But what it also has is everything, like the whole surface of the planet Earth, so to say, right? It's a pointer. We are calculating with a pointer. So it could point to the North Pole. And then if I make a bit flip, it points to the South Pole. These are the two classical states. But if I only make half a bit flip, it would point to the equator. And then it can point to the equator in Africa or somewhere in Central America or anywhere else. So actually, I can calculate with these phase information as well. So you see already that instead of having only two states, which I can use per transistor to calculate, having the whole surface actually gives me a lot of more opportunities to do things. And this is one quantum resource we use. We call this superposition. And the other one is called entanglement. So this pointer is representing one qubit. Now I can, of course, have two qubits. And entanglement actually means that these two qubits, when they're entangled with each other, they always know exactly what the other one is doing at each point of time. They completely share the information. So you can imagine this like if we are all here in this room and we want to solve a certain problem, it's a difference if everyone sits down and starts calculating by themselves, or if we would collect all of our joint know-how and do this work together. And this is really where this exponential speed up comes from, is that these qubits, they kind of do this all together, and they have a huge amount of computational space then that spans up there. And the way we do this is basically we have these chips. On the chips, we put structures there. You see it also in the picture. And each qubit, in the end, is actually an electrical circuit on the chip. So in the end, in our case, we operate roughly at 5 gigahertz. And what we do is we cool down the system to very low temperatures so that the background noise is way lower than this 5 gigahertz signal. And then if it's cooled down, this is what we in physics we call it vacuum state. So there's really no energy in the processor whatsoever. And then I can come and bring a very short 5 gigahertz pulse to a specific circuit, which was empty before. So it was down here, and my pulse has just enough energy to bring me up, for example, to the North Pole. So I do this bit flip. And now if in my little pulse, if I only bring in half the energy, so let's say I make the pulse only half as long, then instead of going all the way up, I end up on the equator. And this is this 50-50 superposition state. So this is the way we program these processors, is basically we encode the logic into these short microwave pulses. And they are usually housed in these, you see, this is the radiance, this is how the computer looks like. So these racks on the left-hand side, these are just full of electronics, control electronics. And then the processor is actually sitting in this white can. So the total size of the system is maybe a few meters by a few meters, filling a small room, so to say. But this is how the system works. So in this can, we create these very low temperatures, a few millikelvin above absolute zero, and then we start programming the processors with these pulses, and we embed our logic, and then we can calculate and run real algorithms on them. And as I said, this is kind of just the beginning. It's a completely new way of compute, but we do see this as a new era in these kind of different phases that we have been observing over the years, starting with mainframes back in the day, personal computers. Now it's all about AI and GPU-based computing, and we do think that quantum computing will be one of those paradigms going forward. But as said, not standalone. These computers will work hand in hand, for example, with GPUs, and I will show you some examples on how we actually solve problems in this hybrid fashion, where some stuff is run on a GPU cluster and some other stuff is done on a quantum computer. So this is kind of why we do this and what we do, how our computers look. And then let's just have a few examples on what can be done today with those machines. And I took here two fields, logistics and pharma. In the end, you will find applications for quantum computing across each and every industry, because I think in each industry we have these complex problems that need to be solved. So I will show you a few examples here, but also in full transparency, these are all proof of concepts. So whenever I say we're doing something with a certain company or so, this means we do work with them, but it's not so that someone is making money as of today by using the quantum computer. So this is we're all learning with each other. We are building the technology, and hopefully in the next few years, we reach the stage where the hardware is becoming powerful enough where you actually can run these commercial use cases. So this is the state of the industry today. So if we start on the logistics sides, there are a few ways to look at it, and one thing is, again, what is all the let's say energy used and the CO2 emissions coming out of this kind of industry. And one way to look at it is just to bring the emissions down. And we are working, for example, with Volkswagen on a project for battery development. So this is using a quantum computer to simulate on the molecular level how these batteries work and how the electrons find their places there. But you can also look at it from just making the processes more efficient. And these are the examples that I brought here. So these are two, one with Infineon and one with Airbus and BMW, where it's about optimization. So the one with Infineon is actually, it's this typical traveling salesman problem where you need to optimize a path based on certain boundary conditions. So here it is actually emptying trash cans, which may sound a bit funny, but for them it's an important problem given the chemicals and everything they use. And they want to optimize the path of the trucks emptying the trash cans. And this is a very complex problem to solve. And this is something that we have been doing with them, also together with Fraunhofer on the research side. And you see here also this is the real example. This is roughly the system size we can solve on a quantum computer today. So it's still far away, of course, from a kind of the real problem that they want to solve, which is much bigger. But we can, for these little toy problems, actually, we can get meaningful results out. And the same goes for the supply chain optimization there, where basically you want to optimize the different parts in the products that you build. Another one, very similar one, is we did with EDF, a power company from France, in the planning the maintenance scheduling for power plants, which is a very important problem that it goes right because you don't want to make any mistakes there, and then there are kind of blackouts all over the country. Again, it's this type of problem where you want to optimize a graph problem, and it's very complex from a mathematical point of view, and the quantum computers actually can help there. And one way to think about it is the way that quantum works is that in the end, instead of trying out all the different paths or all the different schedules one by one in a sequential way, they do this in parallel, and they're kind of going through all the solutions at once. And in the end, only the right solution, so to say, survive. So there's constructive interference for the right solution, and all the wrong solutions, you end up with destructive interference. And this is another way to think about why quantum computers actually are efficient with those problems. So here we did this actually of one of our quantum computers. This was one with 20 qubits on them. And what you see in the data, the green line is the perfect simulation. So 20 qubits you can actually still simulate with a normal computer. And this is also why we like these toy problems, because we can actually check that what we do makes sense in the end. The red line is what has been done on our machines. So you see actually that we are outperforming there the classical simulation with this machine. Then some other problems we did on the Pharma side. And this is more in the spirit of how quantum computing was actually intended to be initially. It was actually a Nobel Prize winner, Richard Feynman, who said in 1981 that nature is too complicated in itself to be simulated by normal computers, so we would better use a quantum system to simulate nature because it's quantum itself. So this was this initial thought. He didn't use the word quantum computer back then, but this is what he was kind of thinking about, a quantum machine that can use quantum processors, for example, in chemistry or biology and the like. And one such example we did actually together with another startup from Finland called Algorithmiq. So they have been doing all the work on our machine here. This is about cancer treatment. And the problem at hand is actually you want to only very locally have the effect of your drug. And you basically the goal is to bring the treatment into the body and then activate the substance with light. And what the challenge here is actually to optimize then the optical properties of these molecules that are there. And this is some work we did. So basically trying to figure out what is the best way to deal with these photosensitizers. And you see here already in this diagram that all of these square boxes, actually, these are tasks which are run on a normal computer. And only this kind of circle on the right-hand side, this is where the quantum computer works. So you see already a little bit the spirit of hybrid workload, where the kind of the initial model selection, model optimization, these kind of things are done on a normal computer, and then only the optimized problem is fed into the quantum computer, which then simulates on the quantum level, and then you also have all the post-processing on a normal computer. And the good news here is that for this particular molecule that we looked at, actually on the quantum computer that we used, we reached this what we call here required precision. So the outcome on a qualitative level is actually good enough. Again, the system size is not yet there, so the complexity of the molecule that we simulate is still quite limited, but in principle it works. And what we need to go forward is basically build bigger computers, bigger quantum computers, so that we can also then simulate more and more complex molecules to really get into this commercial use case in the end. Another such example is actually something we did with UCL, University College London in the UK, which is more a problem from the biology side, where it's about proton transfer in water, and in particular in this protonated form of water, this H3O+, which is a process which is relevant in many biology processes, and they have been looking at this in more detail, and the goal is actually to optimize the mobility of the proton. So you want the proton to move basically through the water, and the question is, what is the best configuration of these H3O+ molecules so that the proton can move? Here what you can vary is the distance between the atoms and also the proton ratio where it sits. So this is kind of the two parameters that you have to play around with. And these lines that you see there moving, this is the potential that comes out. And qualitatively, the proton can move in the best possible way when you have a flat potential, so to say. So then the proton is free to move. So the question is, what's the distance and what's the configuration where we have the flattest potential, so to say. And this is again an example where actually the quantum computer has been working very much hand in hand, even here with a big supercomputer. And it's a little bit this divide and conquer approach, where part of the chemical problem, which is in the bottom left corner, has been solved on the supercomputer, and then this very hard, complex part of it, where it's about highly correlated physics, has been done on a quantum computer. So from a conceptual point of view, again, this is how the workflow was, and you see actually the picture on the bottom, you see it only slightly. This is the SuperMUC NG. It's a big supercomputer in Munich that was used for a lot of the post-processing as well, also some of the pre-processing, and only in the middle, during one specific step, actually, the quantum computer was running a very selected task. And again, the good news is that the green points there are the results, and the green area is this area which is called chemical accuracy, so this is where you want to be. And the good news is that actually we reach this chemical accuracy now with this approach of having a hybrid ansatz between a quantum computer and a big supercomputer. Again, the molecular size for this H3O+ was rather limited, right? It's not a very complex molecule. So we, of course, want in the future to also work with much more complex molecules there. But from a proof of concept point of view, we can show that with this approach, you can actually reach then results which are sufficiently accurate for these scientists who then work with this. And then maybe just one final thing, because nowadays it's all about AI, and many people ask, okay, what can quantum do with AI? And that's actually a very interesting interplay also for me, because it's a two-way street, so to say. So on the one hand side, we already benefit a lot from many let's say, AI methods that we use in designing the chips, in tuning up our computers, in stabilizing our computers. So we benefit a lot from machine learning routines in particular, but also there are quite a few AI algorithms that can be accelerated with quantum computers. And one particular example that I took here is actually creating data that you can then use as training sets for LLMs. This is something that quantum computers are quite good at. It might sound a bit funny, but it's actually in creating just random data, so which is noise. Quantum computers are very good in creating noise, which usually you are trying to fight because this is what kills the performance. But then in some of those cases, actually, you can use this to create data. And we are doing this, for example, with one car manufacturer, and they're creating training data, which they use then for the image recognition for the self-driving car, so that they make sure that this all goes well. So this is about quantum computing and AI, and there are, of course, many other fields and topics I could talk about where quantum computers are being tested. So in a nutshell, to summarize, we are now in a situation where quantum computing becomes productized, and you can buy these machines or you can buy cloud access on those machines. But still, we are in a very early stage where everything we do on the application side is still a proof of concept, and we probably still need 2, 3, maybe 5 years to see the first commercial use cases, so where the processors are powerful enough to get there. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions, of course.
Thanks a lot, Jens. Very interesting, breadth and depth of use cases. I have time for question, okay? I have a question. Last year, we were lucky to have Alain Aspect as a speaker. And talking about use case, he used to say that he was anticipating that maybe the first use cases, or at least practical deployment for quantum, was not so much leveraging the exponential power, computing power, but much more trying to do what we know how to do today with classical computing, but with less energy consumption. So how do you see the deployment? Do you see that first, or you see both?
Yeah, it's hard to say what comes first, but this is definitely one reason to use quantum computers. So in the machines that I've been showing, we use roughly 10 to 20 kilowatts of power. So if you run, let's say, an algorithm the same amount of time, but the big computer would take 10 megawatts of power, we gain 3 orders of magnitude there on the energy side. Yeah.
And another question that I have is, can you explain a little bit on I read some literature, the difference between analog and digital quantum computing?
Yeah, so analog quantum computing, what it means is really you do a simulation of the physical system. So you really implement the kind of the physics that is describing the system under study on your machine. So there's no logic applied to it, no gate operations. Whereas with the digital version, you actually encode an algorithm and you just have C0 and whatever kind of gates running there as a sequence.
And where do you stand between those two?
We do the digital ones. So
you do the
program the machines, yeah.
Are there any questions from the room? Yes, please.
Thank you for an interesting and honest talk. As you're well aware, there are many different qubits, ion traps all the way to photonics. My question to you is, what do you think? Will winner take all, or will different qubits be best suited for different applications?
I think it's a question of time. So where we are today and in the foreseeable future, we will see these modalities coexisting because we are limited by the hardware. This means you want to run the hardware as efficient as possible. And some algorithms, they just fit more natively, let's say, to ion traps, and other algorithms, they fit more natively to superconducting circuits, for example, the way the native gate set is defined. But then maybe at some point when the hardware becomes cheap, like in today's compute, then I guess the most kind of cost-efficient method will be the one that is chosen in the end.
One question over here.
Hello. Thank you for talking about this exciting topic. And you did talking about pharma. So I'm at the pharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years. we know Pfizer has set up some strategy and did something, and we also connect with IBM and try to do some pilots. And we know there's some good progress, like doing those remote chemistry lab, like a pure cloud. But you mentioned still 3 or 5 years, right? Still not in the industry can scale. What is preventing us to do, to get there, we can deliver at a scale? And also, is there any technical bottleneck there? We know all the benefits, right? Energy from all the perspective, the speed. What is?
Yeah, so the hardware is just not there yet. It's similar, I think, to AI, where these AI algorithms have been known for a long time, but the processors were not ready, right? And only when the GPUs became powerful enough, it started to fly. And it's very similar in quantum. So we know already quite many algorithms. Of course, there might be more in the future, but the hardware is not yet powerful enough to really run them at scale. So we need to develop bigger and bigger processors, also better quality in the processors to run the algorithms that we know at scale so that it makes sense commercially.
Okay. Time is up, so let's thank again Joan for this presentation. Thank you very much. I hope to be working with you soon.